Welcome to another episode of Mike at the Museum. In his article about today's subject, Dr. George Ross wrote, "A legend is a story coming down from the past, which many people have believed. Legends are a vital part of our culture, adding spice and color to an otherwise all too often dull and dreary existence." Today, I want to talk to you about not so much an item found here in the museum, but another story, or should I say legend, of the area, the Hallway Tavern. Let's get into the story. In his article, Dr. Ross continued, "Without legends, we would have been deprived of the pleasure of knowing King Arthur and Blackbeard the pirate. It should be remembered that legends often contain an element of truth. History, on the other hand, is the discipline which searches for the truth as it deals with the past and requires authentication, verification, and confirmation." Yes, it seems that when we look at the historical side of the story, we need to look at the facts, even though the legend may make a better story. One story claims that George Rogers Clark and his men traveled near this site as they made their way to Vincennes in 1779 to capture Fort Sackwell, and may have drunk water from its well. Another asserts that Abe Lincoln lodged at this tavern as a young lawyer. Now, other stories build up the importance of the Hallway Tavern as a major stop for stagecoaches and people as they moved west or east along its path. Another story surrounding the Hallway Tavern, located on US 50 just east of Salem, from the City of Salem website, is a legend concerning lost gold. Some historians say that one day in the early 1800s, a stagecoach passing through the area was held up by Indians. The coach was carrying gold, which the Indians made off with. When a posse closed in on them, they supposedly buried the gold in a wooded area just north of the tavern. And as far as anyone else is concerned, that gold is still waiting to be discovered. The general story, which has been put forth, is that at a point midway on the St. Louis-Vincennes Trail, about 9 miles east of Salem and approximately 1.5 miles from Iuka, a gentleman named John Middleton erected an inn in 1818. The purpose of providing food and shelter to the travelers who stopped. Now, some travelers journeyed to the inn by stagecoach and others on horseback. It is assumed that the need for this facility ceased with the coming of the railroad just prior to the Civil War. The City of Salem website adds that this Hallway Tavern got its name because it was located halfway between St. Louis and Vincennes. The building was originally constructed in 1815 and was used both as an inn and a livery stable. Now, stagecoach passengers used the inn on their travels between St. Louis and Vincennes. So the beginning of each of these two stories is very similar. Now, let's look at the records that can be found that could provide some facts. The story says John Middleton built the inn in 1818 or in 1815. The 1825 census records show no Middletons listed in the county. Records show that the land where the inn was located on was unsold until Matthew Thompson purchased the land in 1838. Records then show Thompson sold the land to Thomas Middleton in 1843. Middleton was a doctor and a Methodist preacher. It is said that he also operated a general store and a horse-powered mill. Now, in 1851, Middleton sold the site to his son William E. Middleton. William may have been the one to build the log structure which was found on the site. More facts. There are no census records from 1840, 1850, or 1860 that identify any Middleton as an innkeeper. From what I can gather, the job of an innkeeper is an important enough job that it would have been listed on the census. Trust me, I've done some family genealogy, and a lot of these jobs, such as an innkeeper, is listed when you go looking for some of these things. Another issue with the tavern side of the Hallway Tavern is that even back then, if you're going to run a tavern, you had to have a license to do so. Now, Dr. Ross looked through records from 1823 to 1834, and in none of those records did they show that any Middleton family member was given a license to run a tavern. Another issue is that in 1864, the land the tavern sits on was actually sold to a gentleman named Lloyd Addy. Now, it's noted that due to the expansion of the railroad, that the stagecoach, the transportation mode of the stagecoach and stagecoach lines were actually at this time starting to become obsolete. They weren't needed because the railroad kind of took their place. And then finally, in 1899, the land, once again, that the tavern sits on, passed to the Neff family, and they became owners of the land. Dr. Ross goes on to mention that even Marion County histories seem to have failed to make mention of the Hallway Tavern. 7 pages in the WPA, it was the Works Progress Administration Guide to Historic Sites in Illinois, published in 1939, were devoted to historical attractions along the St. Louis-Vincennes Trail, and the failure to include the halfway house implied that historians had some doubt about its authenticity. So let's get back to the gold story. Now, the one thing I can say that I've been able to find out in some of my readings is that so far, as of the time me doing this video, no one has come forward saying they found the gold or that even they know where the gold is at. Now, the one thing that is true is that there have been some local farmers that have found some Native American artifacts around in that area, but to me that only makes sense because of the Native American tribes that used to live in this area. Okay, so does that make the story about the gold true or just a legend? Well, that's kind of hard to say, because once again, the historian in me says you have to look at the source. And we're not really sure where the source of this story came from. And once again, considering how old this story is and how old the source may be for us to go back and look to see if it's true or just a legend, that may be too hard to do. Another thing to talk about. Did George Rogers Clark and his men really stay at the tavern? Did they have a drink at the well? Well, once again, historically, that may just be too hard to prove. I mean, what are our sources? And without those sources, the best answer I can give you is what I just said. I'm not really sure we can prove he was there or not. Okay, one other one. Did a young lawyer by the name of Abraham Lincoln stay at the inn? Well, I like what the City of Salem's website gave as an answer on this. One of the more prominent customers of the Hallway Tavern, although he probably wasn't considered so at the time, was a young attorney named Abraham Lincoln. He and other lawyers rode the circuit from courthouse to courthouse trying cases in those days. It is highly likely that Hallway Tavern, lying in the location that it does, was visited more than once by the future U.S. president. So when we look at these two issues, honestly, the best answer we can give is, I don't know, maybe. But once again, what's the proof? Where are the sources that say whether or not George Rogers Clark or even Abraham Lincoln stayed at the tavern? I mean, it's probably more likely that a young lawyer, Abe Lincoln, did while he was on that circuit traveling around Illinois. But once again, we just don't know. So what was the point of all this? Growing up, I heard and I believed the stories of the Hallway Tavern. Once I was told about the Middleton connection, or possible Middleton connection, I was even more excited about the stories. But I gotta be honest, the geography, the history teacher side of me wanted to find out more about these stories. Once I read through the Dr. Ross articles, it became clear that there was a separation between what was the truth and what was the story or the legend. Now, yes, the truth in this case probably becomes a little bit more of a downer as we find things that were in the legend, were in the stories that were really just probably maybe not true. As Dr. Ross said, maybe someday evidence can be uncovered that will change our minds. Finally, some years ago, State of Illinois took over the property and renovated the old building. Now, cars, as I'm sure you've probably heard, in the background while I'm standing out here doing this will bypass the Hallway Tavern going east and west from the city of Salem on US 50. Now I'm standing out here in front of the Hallway Tavern. I came out to get last couple of shots here at the tavern and once again see it for myself. While you can, like I am, walk around the tavern, take a look around, the building itself though is closed, so you can't go inside to see if or what renovations were done inside there. Okay, but as for me, I think I'm gonna go look for some gold. Why not? I mean, nobody else has found it yet, and who knows, maybe it really is out here. But hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you've seen, please subscribe, share this one, let people know about it, and I hope to see you next time right here on Mike at the Museum.